afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see me and hear me well. Um, Welcome to the Wednesday webinar at MRSI. My name is Uttara. I'm going to be the moderator for the afternoon. I see many people are joining, so I'm going to give it another 10-15 seconds and we'll proceed into the session. Okay. So welcome everyone, and today's topic is an interesting one, right? With so much going around us, this topic, the eat economy, understanding India through its food consumption, really came to us when we were thinking about all the food suggestions and ideas and everything that seems to be floating around when it comes to the food discourse, right? You hear conversations on proteins, carbs, macros. You hear them about the resurgence of certain native grains. There's so much going on, or whether it's the influx of the global cuisine. So there's so much going on. I think it became so important for us to look into this to understand what really is going on and how can we understand the Indian consumer better by looking at their food consumption, right? Um, Before we proceed, a quick refresher on who we are and why we are here. Sandesh, if you can move to the next slide. MRSI is the Market Research Society of India. It's a not-for-profit autonomous body which was established in 1988. We are essentially an association of providers, buyers, and users of research and insights with the core commitment towards providing a platform to professionals to engage and showcase knowledge. Wednesday webinar becomes one such opportunity where we bring forth industry experts to talk about prevalent topics, to discuss what's going on and how can we take it forward. We're also the webinar committee. I am going to be moderating. My name is Uttara. There's Abhinav Goyal, who's the lead consumer shopper marketplace inside Nestle, who's part of the committee. There's Adya Sinha, who's senior research manager at Third Eye. We have Sundar Muthuraman, who's an independent consultant at marketing measurement. We have Amita Mishra, who's partner and head healthcare check research, and Sivakumar Somanathan, who's the consumer behavior consultant at Curious Cat Consulting. On to the topic and back to the conversation for today. We also have esteemed panelists among ourselves. You see them on the screen. So I welcome both of you. We have before us Ravikumar Narayanan, who's the Director of Strategy and Insights at Elastic Tree. We also have Varsha Rajan Berry, who's the co-founder of Homemakerz and SENSEFUL, an up-and-coming brand which deals with selling native grain-led products in the market. It's a D2C brand. So welcome both of you, and very, very interested in knowing what you guys think is going on. And so I'm going to invite Varsha to start off with her talking points. So Varsha, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Uttara. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, MRSI, for having me here today. And I think my presentation is largely coming from the perspective that I have built being a co-founder of a food startup. And I'm going to talk about certain trends that I have observed over a period of 4 to 5 years. The main trend that I want to start off with is that how the consumer behavior is changing and how India is thinking differently about food. So one of the biggest shifts that we are seeing in India today is not just in what consumers are buying, but in how they are thinking about food altogether. Consumers today, they are more aware, they are questioning, they are more informed, and I would like to use the term they are more intentional in their choices. They come from a certain background, intent, and knowledge as to what they want to buy. Now, earlier, when we were growing up, and even in maybe our younger days, all of us, our food decisions were largely driven by pricing, availability, what is the habit, what is convenient. But what we see today is that consumers are reading labels, they're questioning ingredients, they're paying attention to processing, they're looking for greater transparency from the brands. And at the same time, I think what is important for us to understand is that consumers are not looking, I mean, they want all this, but they don't want to completely change the way they are eating. They still want familiarity. They still want enjoyment. And let's not forget, no matter how healthy they want to have their food, but they will not give up on taste. So I think that is one of the most important things which us is still driving. So it is this balance, I think, which is defining what the modern Indian consumer is doing and thinking today. We've also seen what I would like to term it as mindful eating. So you can go to the slide where I talk about mindful eating. So it's not about, here we are not talking about, when I say mindful eating, I do not mean any kind of dietary restrictive eating. I do not mean any kind of complicated wellness lifestyle. I mean something which, where everyday food or food served on an everyday table becomes more clean, more balanced, more rooted, and then only it will be more sustainable. Because any kind of other restrictive kind of eating can never be sustained for a longer period of time. So, and we can move to the slide on enablers. So how have I arrived at it? Because there are certain, I feel, and my research says, and my experience as a founder of a startup which started from ground up. So my interactions with consumers, whether it was in exhibitions, it was in modern trade, in general trade, talking to them, getting their feedbacks. So all of this has driven to a point that what has enabled this shift in the Indian consumer today. So the consumer today, I feel, has extreme access to information, whether it is through social media, it is through podcast, it is through their wellness content, nutritional education, online communities, or influencer led conversations or marketing. People are far more informed about the ingredients. They have questions about processing. How processed is your food? How much, whether it is less processed, how much of processing has it undergone, and long term wellness, which has become important, and we could see in the last few years. Digital platforms, a big factor, which has made wellness focused and niche food categories much more visible and accessible. So, what I would like to bring, a very important point here, is that normally what would have happened earlier, that niche brands or startup brands or health focused brands, all those brands, till the time they reach, very difficult for them, for us to reach all the retail shelves across India. And that is why here the digital platforms, the e-commerce, the quick commerce has played a very important role in the discovery of brands like us, of startups like us, of wellness categories, of health focused food, niche food categories. And that is, I define that as democracy of discovery, because everybody sitting, it is not restricted to to urban cities or centers alone. And this is how they can introduce or bring millets or native grains, which I will talk about later as well, or cleaner ingredients into their better everyday eating. The pandemic, we started post the pandemic, and I think the pandemic has played and has accelerated the awareness around preventive wellness, around immunity, around everyday food habits. People have started thinking more deeply, what are they consuming, how is this food going to impact their well-being or their lifestyle. Last but not the least, I'm a parent of a millennial, and it is a generational influence which has played a very important role. The millennials have accelerated the first wave of wellness focused consumption, and Gen Z has taken this ingredient awareness and conscious discovery to another level. This generation is highly digital, extremely curious, comfortable in researching the products before they buy them. So I would say that what are we ultimately seeing in a consumer? Consumer who's more ingredient conscious, who's more aware and more intentional than ever before. And we come to the gap slide, you can move there, is that we have observed, so I was a startup, as I said, started 4 5 years ago. We have observed this changing behavior, but at the same time we have seen a clear gap which is emerging in the market. That's what we saw a few years ago. So there were many products. We can see products, I mean, they have added protein, added nutrition, multiple additives to make the product more, or to make the product more nutritious. But we have seen this happening. But having said that, I mean, there are certain kinds of reliance on artificial fortification, which is, so you are making a heavy wellness claim, but what is it based on? Probably based on a lot of additives, which is, I'm not saying that all additives are bad, but this could be an additive which is like you're adding protein to it, you're adding minerals, or you're adding fiber to it. So I have a feeling that this is somehow, I as a founder saw that there is a disconnect in the, you're looking for a clean product, but what you're getting in the market is already coming with additives, and the consumer is still asking that, can we not get better ingredients, can it not have a better foundation? And that's where we saw the gap, where we said that, what if the ingredient itself was nutritious? So that's where we come in. I stop here, and Uttara, we can.
Yeah. No, actually, very interesting thoughts, and I think that it was making me wonder. Very interesting changes, right? It's also what you see around you. But I feel like, when it comes to India, there's also a mass consumer reality, a mass India reality, and I wonder if that's something which is also seeing these shifts. And I think Ravi, since a lot of your work, and I'm preempting it for the audience, has been with mass India and essentially, especially ISEC 1 to 8. I wanted to know if you think what you think is going on specifically with respect to, if we were to contrast this with what mass India seems to be talking about, or showcasing for us.
Yeah, that's right, Uttara. I think the points that Varsha highlighted, they are happening. And what we, in research, we call as trendsetters and early adapters, they have come into picture now. And I think it's time it's going to convert into mass movement. As of now, it's not a mass movement because there are other constraints that are there. Like in a family, there are different members, their taste preferences, nutrition requirements, and all of it. But I think it's on course to become a mass movement. We can see that soon.
Yeah, it was very interesting. But anyway, maybe we continue, and I can throw my thoughts later. But Varsha, anything you want to say? Sorry, you want to add something? Varsha, you're on mute. Sorry, just clarifying. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to, like, kind of continue from here, and kind of bring in other things, and how the entire debate and discussion on the millets and the native grains, which I talked about earlier. So I have already said that this is what I feel, and this is what I see as a gap. And the question that, we as a brand, when we started Senseful and Homemakers, one question that really guided our thinking was, what if the ingredient itself was nutritious? Can we, why is it that nutrition always has to be artificially added later? Can we can we not have the basic ingredient as nutritious, that we don't need to add anything? And that thinking of ours naturally led us towards native grains and traditional Indian ingredients. So, India has always had a very incredibly rich heritage in ingredients. For generations and generations, our kitchens have used millets and ancient grains that were naturally nutrient rich, and they were integrated in our everyday eating. And I want to make this clear here. There's still certain pockets that, even when, I'm sorry to go a little back and forth, I mean, this was something which was already there and is still there in certain regions of the country. For example, the interiors of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Uttarakhand, UP. So these are some of the places where it's still there. And but earlier it used to be there across, for generations. And what changed this? When the coming of the wheat, the coming of the green revolution, and how it brought in wheat, and the way it brought in wheat, that wheat became our main staple. So there is no, I'm not comparing it here with rice in any case, because rice is gluten free. Rice is and rice is eaten, in the east and in the south way more than it is eaten in the west and the north. What the point that I'm trying to make is that these things were naturally there, and they were deeply integrated into our everyday food. But what happened? Why and how these ingredients, which were natural to us, they became niche, and the processed food became mainstream. or any other ingredients and additives became mainstream. And this is where we saw, as brand owners and startup owners, we saw the opportunity. How can we bring these ingredients back, which will already have the nutrition, which are traditional Indian ingredients? But the challenge here was that we are not going to bring this out in complicated ways. We have to bring them out in a format which is already familiar. The consumer is familiar with this format, and which they can consume every day. And so, whether it is, for example, our formats be millet noodles, millet pasta, millet rice. So millet rice is not new. Millets can be eaten as is also. So what is it that we have done to millet rice that it's become like convenient and easy for people? I'll talk about that later. But the philosophy here was very simple: not health food, but better everyday food. I think food that is familiar, food that is convenient, food that is enjoyable, and naturally built on better foundations. And that is where, we see that, we've seen the shift in the consumer, and it translates into the purchasing behavior. I can talk about how it has seen our growth. So if we could move to the slide. Yeah. So what has particularly been encouraging for us is that these consumer conversations are no longer theoretical. So I have seen this. I have seen this from experience, and I've seen them translating into actual purchase behavior. Today, our noodles, our pasta, and our millet rice categories are seeing strong pan-India demand across modern retail chains, e-commerce, and quick commerce platforms. And importantly, so yes, for starters, it was found in a few urban pockets, but it's no longer limited to that. As I mentioned earlier, it is all to do with the digital discovery. So we are seeing traction across metros as well as in the emerging cities. It clearly reflects that how awareness around ingredient conscious food choices is spreading much more widely across India. Now, when I talk about it, since we are, we have gone back to the millets, and to convert those millets into the product format, whether it is noodles, whether it is pasta, whether it is rice, it's a very, very difficult thing that we've taken at hand. So, things would have been easier if we would have added gluten to it, if we would have added wheat to it. But we've gone a step further, and we have tried to keep millets the way they are, gluten free, and kind of converted them into products. So noodles, which India loves to consume, and how noodles can be made healthy because of these native grains and millets, but can be and maintain their basics of being gluten free. So and the grains which have become very popular are jowar, ragi, multi-millet, foxtail, which have shown a very strong consumer acceptance. And at the same time, there are growing ones are barnyard, bajra, and little millet, which are still evolving, which I think is very natural in any changing foodscape. All of it, or any food landscape, all of it will not be, kind of taken on, and everybody will not start consuming every millet, immediately. So there will be, some will be, the offtake will be more than the others. And also, when I talk about, like, if we are converting them or we are processing them into, because there is a certain amount of processing that goes into making these, but bare minimum is like we have three formats, which are like our noodles and our pasta and our millet rice. So out of which, some grains we will see, in some areas it's the noodles which will be picked up. Pasta is more versatile, because it can be used as consumed as a salad, as an Indian dish, as a continental dish, Italian dish. So it's more versatile, and the offtake is much faster, and pan India again. And I think the slide shows it very clearly. One of the strongest indicators of this shift has been our growth trajectory. I think over the last 4 to 5 years, we have seen 15x growth, which reflects that there's a growing acceptance of mindful, I would say it again, mindful and ingredient conscious food consumption in India. So that's where I feel, and I've already talked about the whole role which the digital commerce has played. Now, another very important sales channel that I would like to talk about is where we have seen the shift is that we are being accepted in the HoReCa ecosystem. HoReCa is hotels, restaurants, and cafes. So this is the ecosystem where so far we have made baby steps in uh, Delhi, in Bombay, in Goa, in Dehradun, and some places in Uttarakhand besides Dehradun. So we are seeing them at schools. I'm sorry, schools, corporates. We are talking about corporate canteens, food service partners. They are increasingly looking for products that are combining the consistency, the convenience, the cleaner ingredients, and the taste that we can supply to them. And so I think this movement that we are talking about today is towards better everyday eating, which is now becoming much broader than just a retail trend. If I have to move on to the last concluding slide, if we can move on to that, I personally believe that this is just the beginning. And as Ravi mentioned very clearly, that it is happening, but it's not mainstream as yet, but it is just the beginning. And the future of, I think, in India will belong to brands like us and more that can combine tradition with convenience, nutrition with flavor, transparency, very important, transparency with trust, front of packet labeling, how much protein, how much fiber. Do not make any false claims. Consumers today are not looking at unrealistic lifestyles. They're looking at comfortable food which they can enjoy every day. Food which is familiar, trustworthy, enjoyable, and better. And ultimately, that's what we believe that the future of food is headed towards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Varsha. Very, very insightful pieces of insights that came to us. It was just making me wonder, this entire resurgence of millets, which clearly has been a key part of the success for your brand. And it's interesting, right? Like you said, and Ravi also touched upon it. It's such a traditional old world wisdom that we see around, and it makes me like in fact it sort of becomes a good segue into what we're going to have next, where Ravi, I'm going to invite you to take over, but I think very specifically look at what is India actually eating, right? These are very great, like great trends and context to understand how what our attitude seems to be. But I think what will be important and I think very, very useful is if we can also look at a very close look, like an up close and personal look at what people are actually eating. So I'm going to invite Ravi to talk us through some of the work that he's done. And I know we specifically will touch upon breakfast as an occasion, but I think very excited to see what we find from there, Ravi. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Uttara. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So today I'll be presenting insights from our syndicated research, what we call as table share internally. Can you move to the next slide? Yeah. So a few years back, some of our clients came to us and said, is it possible to get data on foods consumed in India? Of course, we specialize in foods research, and therefore naturally they came to us. It's all of us know what food is being consumed in India, be it the roti or the rice or the poha or idli or dosa. But so far there's no quantification, no hierarchy of dishes. We don't know what percentage of households are consuming each of those dishes. So that's what actually triggered this research. The other reason why clients were specifically interested is like what Harsha was mentioning in the previous module, lots of trends, awareness on various aspects which are critical to food, so much of industry phenomenon, be it social media influences and all of it. And therefore, is there a need to track how the food habits are changing? That was the other key question that was posed to us. And that kind of made us look at this research. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So one is mapping what food is being consumed at households. That is there. But that is not enough for brands. Brands also require inputs on what can become the next big ready to cook or ready to eat products. That's where they can play. And a good example is idli batter. Right? All of us know that idli is a bit easy to make, whereas the preparation involved in batter, that is time consuming. So about, I think 30 years back, some entrepreneurs saw good opportunity and they started actually preparing the batter in the stores and vending it in loaves. That's how it all started. And then slowly it became, they started packing in the polythene bags and all of it. It was an unbranded commodity. And later on, brands came into picture, and then a lot of changes, innovation happened. So it's a 3,000 crores product now, idli batter today. And likewise, there are many ready to cook and ready to eat products as of now. But what is the next product that can become a successful ready to cook or ready to eat dish? That was the question posed to us. To answer that, we added questions. We layered some attitudinal dimensions. One is how much time or effort it takes to prepare a dish. That is one, because that's a factor which makes consumers think of ready to cook or eat dishes. The other one is openness to buying a ready to cook or ready to eat dish. So these are two questions we added along with mapping the food and beverages consumed at the household. Next. A quick note on how we went about doing this. It's a quantitative research. That's what is going to allow us to take clear decisions. And we used a day after recall methodology. On the day of field work, the consumer was asked what are all the food items that were consumed the previous day, starting from the time they woke up till the time they went to bed. There are, of course, 7 occasions, so to say: before breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, evening, dinner, and post-dinner. And they were asked to recall all the food items, whether it is a main dish or a side dish or a beverage, fruit, nuts, snacks, and sweets, everything that was consumed, plus all the food items consumed by all the members. The only thing is that should have been consumed at the home. The source could be anything. Of course, in India, most of it is homemade. Whether it is homemade or an RTC or a parcel they bought or the Swiggy Zomato they used, the source could be anything. But anything that is consumed at home, that is what is kind of getting mapped. In terms of coverage, we went all urban, all the 1 million, selected 16 cities to represent the 1 million plus cities. 3,400 plus respondents were covered in this research. Next. So women were the respondents because in a household, if they are the main decision makers on food, groceries, and food preparation, they became the most relevant respondents. And we covered ISEC 1 to 8. That is a new socioeconomic classification MRSI has recommended. And ISEC 1 to 8 represents a fairly mass representative sample. So that's the coverage of this research. Next. So now we look at the findings. We'll start off with breakfast because that's an interesting point to start with. And the terminology we'll be using is what we call as occurrence. That's nothing but the percentage households consuming a dish in a day. We are not using the conventional term like penetration or incidence because in foods there are different definitions. Sometimes penetration is percentage households using in a week or in a month. So to avoid the confusion, we are calling it as occurrence. Yeah, you can move to the next slide. Sure. This presents at an overall level, all urban, what are the main dishes that are consumed at the household for breakfast. I'll come to side dish later, but what we're seeing here is main dish. On top, you can see the net. That's about 85%. That doesn't mean the other 15% are not consuming a main dish. You can see that about 13% are consuming snacks, all your samosas, kakras, and all of it. So that's the mix that is there. Now, if you look at the specific dishes, on top you can see idli and wheat roti. They are the topmost consumed dishes, pan India, urban. And then comes bread, poha, upma. And then there is fragmentation. We saw that there are 100 plus dishes that are getting consumed when you look at an all urban basis. So one question that can come to you at this point in time is, what is the level of presence of the nutritious, the ingredient-based dishes that we just spoke about in Varsha's session? So we see that in regions. When you go to the next slide, we'll see that in certain regions, we see the prevalence of those dishes, the millet-based dishes, and all of it. And I'll come to that in a moment. So this is the region-wise the slide, the dishes that are consumed in each of those the 4 regions. You can see the complete diversity there. Of course, in South, it's predominantly idli. We saw that as the overall number one dish. And then if we come to wheat roti, the number two dish that we saw overall, that's over-indexed in East and North. And then if you take West, it's poha that is most consumed. You can also interestingly see in North a variety of parathas: aloo paratha, plain paratha, cauliflower flower paratha, radish paratha, and lacha paratha. So basically, this is how consumers are trying to balance the nutrition requirement while they are following a conventional food pattern that may be there. Now, in East, you can see interestingly, bread is coming as number two, which is unusual, and we don't see such a large number in either region. And within East also, if we see specifically in Calcutta, this number 17 goes up to 27. That's a number one breakfast. Of course, those who are familiar with Calcutta know that it's a very common breakfast food item there. And then, of course, we see unique presence of rice also in East for breakfast. And that's predominantly happening from Patna to a certain degree. And in West, apart from poha, we see toast, paratha, bread, and all of it. In South, apart from idli, we see a range of dishes, starting with dosa, puri, upma, puttu, chapati, and all of it. So that's the diversity. You can go to the next slide. In fact, within a region also, nothing is uniform. There's a fair amount of diversity that exists. In North, for example, you can see the top three dishes. If you look at Delhi, Lucknow, and Jaipur, they are very different. And similarly, East also, there's a good amount of variation. I touched on bread being quite dominant in Calcutta, but not necessarily in other cities like Patna. And West also has similar divergence. Now, when you come to South, idli is the most regularly or most often consumed dish in many cities across South. Incidentally, I came across a LinkedIn post today morning. Harish Bhatt, who is a Tata veteran and also brand consultant, had written a nice poem on idli as to why it is quite appealing to consumers, why it has endured so many centuries and generations. There are several angles to it as to why idli is such an appealing dish, but one is also to do with the nutrition profile. Idli has an interesting combination of carbohydrates as well as proteins because we add urad. And when it is taken with the coconut chutney, which is a common side dish that is used, we get a good amount of fiber and fat as well. So that's the interesting anecdote there. While idli is there as a dominant breakfast dish in South, we also see a lot of unique dishes coming out across cities, and that too in fairly significant numbers. If you take Bangalore, there is Bisibelabath, and then tamarind rice. In Chennai, there is Pongal. Coimbatore also has, but Chennai is quite dominant. Vijayawada has got Pesarattu, and Calicut has got Patri, and Cochin has got Puttu. So that's the level of diversity that is there. So I mentioned about the millets and some of those nutritious ingredients showing up in regions. The data is not here, but what we have seen in when we looked at the data in a granular fashion is that specific regions and specific cities have that. For example, if you take Bangalore, for lunch, there's a fair amount of consumption of ragi balls and some jover dishes. In Chennai, for evening snacks, there is a significant consumption of ragi gruel, the health food drink. And even in West, in Maharashtra, and even in East, in certain regions, there is consumption of bajra roti, java roti, and all of it. So all of that, I think, is happening. One observation is that some of these are traditional dishes. They've been there for centuries. For some reason, they've forgotten for a few decades. But with the emergence of the discussion around nutrition, additives, transparency, and all of it, those are actually getting revived. As of now, what we are seeing is the traditional formats. And of course, Varsha spoke about the new formats, whether it's a pasta or millet noodles. That is catching up in the top end of the segment, the trendsetters and the early adopters. And I think it's probably going to take decades of probably a decade of effort for it to become a mass movement. And brands also have to innovate, and that's exactly what people like Varsha are doing in terms of bringing those food options to people. Yeah, can go to the next slide. So now we move on to side dish. Now you can see overall 56% households are consuming side dish. The question is, what happens to the remaining? Are they not having any side dish? So one, we need to see that there are certain dishes, for example, poha, that doesn't require a side dish. Or for example, say toast or bread, they go well with beverages like tea. About 47% consume beverage along with breakfast. So that's one reason why not everybody is having a proper side dish. The other interesting thing that we see is that fair number of them are having accompaniments, be it pickles or curd or salad, butter, and some of those stuff. I think here's where convenience comes into picture. Subsequently, I'm going to show some data on convenience, how consumers are perceiving dishes and convenience. But these two factors play a role in terms of what is the side dish that is being chosen as of now. Next. So the side dish, now we can see the diversity across regions. Now, if you see South, and that's where maximum side dish consumption is happening in terms of 83% are consuming side dish, followed by East, almost 68%. North and West, it's a bit limited. Now in South, you can see a range of chutneys, be it coconut chutney, peanut chutney, tomato chutney, and kara chutney. It's possible that these evolved over time, taking into account the taste preferences, but the underlying nutrition also is getting emphasized when we see a diversity of these side dishes. And then, of course, comes sambar, the gunpowder, kurma, egg curry, and all of it. In North, of course, you can see most of them are accompaniments, be it curd, salad, pickles, butter, and jam. I think that's where the convenience angle comes into picture. There is, of course, the proper side dish like aloo gopi, dal makhni happening there, but that's to a smaller degree. I'm talking about breakfast, keep in mind that. In East, we see vegetable sabjis coming into picture. 70% or 17% are consuming sabji as a side dish. And then we also have chana sabji and soybean sabji coming into picture, and some accompaniments are coming there. West again has a range, starting with some accompaniments like pickles, going on to side dishes like coconut chutney, sambar, curd, butter, and all of it. In South, I spoke about chutney. Again, if you look at an item like peanut chutney, it's quite interesting. Within South, different cities behave differently. If you take Andhra, peanut chutney is highly over-indexed there. Almost 40% consume in Hyderabad and Vijayawada peanut chutney. It is much smaller in other cities. So that's the level of diversity that exists in India. Next. So that painted a picture in terms of what is the kind of food that is eaten, what is the hierarchy of dishes. Now we'll deep dive into two of the dishes that we touched upon to understand some of the other nuances. One is the wheat roti. And top left, you can see the occurrence, which is the percentage households using, that is 39%. In the previous slide, we saw that 8% is the occurrence, but of course, that is breakfast. You can see in the bottom left, the occasion level occurrence. Breakfast is 8%, and we have wheat roti being eaten for lunch and dinner. So that's special about this. It's a what we call as a multi-occasion dish. Whereas idli, if you see, it's primarily what we call as a breakfast specialist. It is not eaten that much in other occasions. Onto the top right, we can see the city level occurrence. Wheat roti is of course consumed across most cities except in South. That's the kind of prevalence it has got. The next metric is frequency. 6 days in a week is what the consumption frequency of wheat roti is out of 7 days. This is another important dimension. One is the percentage households consuming. Other one is how often it is consumed. Again, if you take a dish like idli, it's only 2.3 days. The in a week that it is getting consumed, whereas wheat roti is getting consumed a lot more consistently. That's what we notice. The next two metrics that we see, one is time and effort and required in preparation. We assessed on a 5-point scale, that is 2.5 out of 5. And the next one is willingness to try RTC, RTE, that is 2.4 out of 5. So both indicate that it's just above, just average or below average, which means it's not such a difficult thing to make, and therefore I'm not that open to trying out an RTC or RTE format. And that gets visible if you look at the bottom center chart, which is the source of preparation. When it comes to wheat roti, 95% is homemade. There's a small proportion of consumers who are buying RTC format packaged, and then there's of course some takeaway. So that summarizes about the wheat roti. Also on the bottom right, you can see the co-consumed items. A lot of analysis that can be done with this set of data. Move to the next slide. So next dish we'll do a deep dive is kande poha, quite popular in West Maharashtra, Mumbai. Occurrence is only 7.4% because it's again a breakfast specialist. Frequency is also 3 in contrast to 6 that we saw for wheat roti. And the time and effort required in preparation is much lower, it's under 2 out of 5. And willingness to try is also just an average. And in terms of occurrence, you can see that it's mostly in west and to some degree in north Jaipur. In terms of source of preparation, predominantly that's also homemade, 88%. But we see an interesting 10-11% of RTC coming into picture here. And there's a small proportion of takeaway that is also there. See, one more aspect that impacts the ease of preparation is also in terms of the habit, right? While an RTC is available for a poha, if someone for some reason probably experimented and they decided that they will kind of make it at home, they tend to perceive that it's an easy thing to make. So that's also a factor that we have to consider while interpreting these numbers. Next. So here we can see the time and effort required in preparing the dish. The 5-point scale that we use is shown at the center, very low to very high. On to the left, we have shown the dishes that are most difficult to make. Mutton curry and chicken gravy and Bengali fish curry. These, of course, have a rating of above 4 out of 5 non-veg dishes. And we also see some veg dishes which are seen as more difficult, rajma, chole, and matar paneer. So now if you come on to the right side, that lists the dishes that are easy to make. It is the Kerala puttu, and then of course you have the chutneys, the coconut chutney and the carrot chutney, and then the boiled egg, raita. All of these have a rating of less than 2 out of 5. These are the ones which are considered as easy to make dishes. You can go to the next slide. So in the beginning, I highlighted about the need to identify opportunities in the RTC, RTE space, which are the dishes that can become the next big RTC or RTE. So this analysis attempts that basically we are plotting each dish on two dimensions. One is on x-axis you can see the time and effort required to prepare the dish, and on y-axis you can see the willingness to try the dish in an RTC format. I've not plotted all the dishes here, just for illustration's sake. I've taken the dishes that I've shown in the previous slide. In the previous slide, we saw 6 dishes that are difficult to make. And you can see the top right quadrant, that is what we call as high potential. The dishes that are difficult to make, and consumers feel that they are open to trying these dishes if they come in RTC or RTE format. Out of the 6 dishes, interestingly, six of them are in the top right quadrant, high potential quadrant. 2 of them, mutton curry and Bengali fish curry, are in the bottom right quadrant. For some reason, even if they are difficult to make, consumers are of the opinion that they would rather do it as a homemade dish the way they're continuing to do it. So a dish that is difficult to make does not necessarily become something a high potential for RTC or RTE. Now, if you look at the other set of dishes, we saw the 6 dishes that were easy to make. Interestingly, all of them are in the low quadrant. They are easy to make. That's what we saw earlier. In terms of their openness to try it out as RTC or RTE, there is very limited support. That's why it's in the low quadrant. So this is something which we can do for all the dishes. I've just shown here only for illustration purpose. We can move to the next slide. So I want to share some nuggets to close with. So one is the discussion on how easy or difficult it is to prepare a dish, because that also comes into picture. While there's openness among consumers to try more nutritious food ingredients that are important, they also consider what is convenient for them. Interesting point that we noticed is a same dish which is easier to make in north, for example chapati, is considered a bit difficult to make in south. That's how there are these cultural nuances. And take idli as well. It's considered easy to make in south, whereas in west it is relatively more difficult. That's one. The other interesting thing is about milk. I mean, all of us know that tea is the most consumed beverage and also most regularly consumed beverage in India. I've not shown data here, but that's what the study also says. Interesting point is milk comes next. If you see which is the most regularly consumed beverage next to tea, that's milk. Of course, the number of households that are consuming milk is much smaller, but in the households that are consuming milk, it's fairly consistent. 6 out of 7 days it is getting consumed. Yeah, that's all I want to share at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Super insightful, and I think makes you wonder, right? I mean, for me, for instance, I started off by saying how, for all of us when we're surrounded on the social media, all of these chatters around the avocado toast of the world, it really humbles you to see what Mass India is talking about, right? Like it's fairly, it almost becomes a reality check to say that, these trends can be trends, but when it comes to Mass India, it's very important to look at what they're actually eating. Any thoughts, Varsha, as closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, very, yeah, I mean, very, very insightful and very interesting because from where we are coming, coming from a very niche, health conscious consumer, which and their behavior changing, and and in the hope that it becomes a mass in the next, as Ravi said, in the next decade or so. So that's interesting. But I just want to one observation that I have, again coming from my perspective, is that even when an idli or a paratha or a upma or any of these dishes, when they become, and they are mainstream, and they are the important breakfast item, but how I go back to my native grain, and how an idli can be like how he mentioned, like a ragi idli or a ragi dosa.
Hmm.
So, how can a popular mass consumption food and native grain marry each other, and we provide something to the consumer which is inherently, it is a carb, millets are also carbs, inherently, I mean, they're carbs, but high in fiber and protein. So, how we
Hmm.
can, it'll be interesting to see this transition, which has already started, I think, and will, as he rightly mentioned, will take maybe a decade or more to become mainstream.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
think
that's interesting. Yeah.
it's a great opportunity, right, for one to sort of take forward the mass pattern into something niche, like you're saying. And we see a lot of brands already trying to optimize on that. So thank you so much. What I'm going to do now is open up the forum to some questions. We already, so I'm going to request the audience to please post their questions in the question answer box, which you see on your screen. We already have some questions, so I'm going to go ahead and ask. I think this question comes first to you, Ravi. The question is, do we know the incidence of packaged foods in meals? How big are they? How small are they? So, is there anything that you want to say on that?
Yeah. If we what we tracked is of course what is being consumed at home. Right now, it's in the range of 10 to 15% or 10 to 20%, depending on what specific item we take. Right. I'm not talking
Hmm.
about an overarching incidence, but let's take for example
Hmm.
poha that we saw. It's about 12%
Hmm.
when it's consumed at home. They use an RTC, or if you take an idli or
Hmm.
dosa, it ranges in the form of 15-20%. But broadly, what we
Right.
know from various researches that we do is there are segments of consumers. There are consumers who tried RTC and they've stuck to it. They've tried RTC, they kept it for emergency use. And there are people who have tried RTC or they've not tried RTC, but they've remained homemade. So that's how the pattern remains.
Yeah. Yeah. We have another interesting one coming up, and either of you can address this one. Is what are your views on the future prospects of plant-based meat and dairy products?
Well,
I mean, we see that happen a lot. Yeah,
yeah,
go on.
that is another trend which is really, really upcoming. See, inherently, as at a personal level, I somehow feel that, I mean, why do we have to have meat? And is a vegetarian less privileged not eating meat, that we have to serve a plant-based meat kind, and we have to coin them as given those names, plant-based meat, etc. So that is my personal disconnect with the whole thing. But yes, I think the trend is catching on, especially in metros. And now when we go to these like the parties, etc., and we see them being served liberally as starters and as main course. But I honestly have not gone into the depth of the ingredients of it. How much of processing is it entailing, and then depending on that, how healthy the final product is. It could be, it could be tasty and close to a non-vegetarian meal, but I am not sure of the ingredients. And the second part was the dairy based. The second part of the
Yeah,
question,
yeah,
Pooja?
yeah. Dairy products. Yes,
Yeah, the
yes.
dairy products. I don't know how, because a vegan is in, and a lot of people are giving up on dairy. So and
Mm.
there's a lot of debate and discussion, at least again coming from the same consumer segment with which I am dealing with. They are questioning dairy. They're questioning the what is going into making of the dairy which we actually get to eat or consume. Even milk is being questioned. So these are things which people are getting aware, and they're not
Yeah.
sure, and how much, and especially the packaged, the milk dibbas that you get, the toned dibbas that you get.
Mm.
How much of milk it is it really? I mean, I did a test once and it didn't turn out to be milk at all. So it just
Mm.
burnt and it became silver paper. So
Yeah.
so I think the same segment which is making this shift is questioning dairy as well.
I just want
Right.
to add here.
Yeah.
So one is the
Yeah.
concept, how relevant or appealing it is. The second one is how brands are going to innovate in that domain. Even the current RTC products
Mm.
that we see, while there was a need, it's because brands innovated, be it manufacturing, packaging, and all of it. Some of them become so big they are. And therefore, I think for this product as well, it's going to be probably dependent on what role brands are going to play.
Yeah. I have another one. The questions actually. I think Ravi, you may be able to take this better, but Varsha, open to hearing from you. Is given that milk is seeming to be the second largest consumed beverage in the South, especially, what do we think is the prospect of ambient products and ambient beverages or anything, in fact? What do we think is the trend that we see around that? Do we have any sense on that?
Let me clarify, it's not the second largest drink. One, if you look at the percentage of households consuming milk as a beverage, that is
Hmm.
still smaller. But the fact is that they
Yeah.
are consuming consistently. So that gives a
Right.
fair indication that if you have a set of people consuming fairly regularly, it is possible, it has potential to become a much bigger beverage in itself. That is one. But answering the broader question, from the data, what we can see is if you look at
Hmm.
tea itself, which is the most
Hmm.
consumed drink. Yes, the regular tea is the biggest of all, 50-60% of households consuming. But we have a range of variants, starting with be it the ginger tea, the lemon tea, the black tea. About 6 or 7 variants of tea are actually dominating at this point in time. So from a mass
Hmm.
market perspective, it's going to take time for new kinds of beverages to come into picture. But as of now,
Hmm.
what people are seem to be comfortable with is the variants of the most popular drink tea.
Right. Right. Okay. Um, so I think Sandesh, Deepa, we have time to take on one or two questions. I'm going to close after that. So I think the last one perhaps, or maybe second last. Another one was, I think this can be addressed by Varsha. I don't know if you or Ravi, even you, is we spoke about consumers wanting to know about ingredients and reading the labels, right? Do we have any sense on how big is this part of the pie? How big and how prevalent this behavior is? How many of the consumers, do we have any sense on that in terms of a percentage, if at all?
Yeah. So, Uttara, maybe not in terms of percentage, but in terms of a shift that I can, like the shift that we have noticed is from across, various touch points of ours, whether it's modern retail or it's general trade or it's exhibitions or food, even, for example, our supplies to schools and restaurants and hotels. I don't know how many of us who are here right now are aware of the fact that the food FDA and the FSSAI has come up with a ruling that there should be gradually we should move towards front of package labeling, which means that your package should be
Mm.
able to disclose right up front. People do not have to turn back and read in small font and small print, okay, this much protein, this much, like you should be talking about it unapologetically, whether it's your sugar, it's your salt, it's your protein, it's your fiber, etc. Now, some brands have started. See, it's very easy for startups because we are so close to the consumer that it's easy for us to adapt and to quickly change. So
Yeah.
we did do that. So we did do that. We are
Mm.
disclosing right on front, for example, that this is the percentage of millet, this is the percentage of salt, whatever, protein, fiber, etc. And we have seen the growth. We have seen
Mm.
that the consumer is reading that. I have stood in modern retail chains in cities after cities where we are selling our products, and we've done that for months and weeks, and we've seen, oh, okay, this has this much, oh, it's right here. And people have started picking it up, even in the horeca
Yeah.
sector. Even in the horeca, the minute I started declaring that this is what my product contains, there has been a larger and a bigger offtake of those products. So I think that
Mm.
it is important to I think the consumer is aware, the consumer is questioning. It's just not very simple to say that, okay, we are making a jowar noodle. No, what is the percentage of jowar in it? So there
Mm.
is an awareness, there is a definite increase in the sales, and which we have seen by this change so consumer is aware.
Yeah. I think thank you so much. We're I think almost on time up. So I think it's been a great session with so much insights and I think perspectives that I think were not as evident or obvious for many of us, including myself. So I'm going back very enlightened. So thank you so much once again, Ravi and Varsha, for making time for this. Thank you to the audience. Very quickly, as a closing note on the session, just want to quickly touch upon the initiatives that MRSI is taking on. The community program, which is essentially an initiative which encourages young researchers to come participate in showcasing their ability of leading practical market research projects. So please, I encourage you all to look at young talent in your organizations and come join us. Another one is, of course, the DP Act and Rules. It's essentially a set of guidance that MRSI is providing to ensure ethical research is being practiced everywhere you go. Thank you so much for everyone who joined in. Hope to see you again for the next one. You can stay connected with us across all social media platforms on the screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
once
you.
again,
Thanks,
MRSI.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.